From the nation's capital, the Conservative Caucus presents Conservative Roundtable, an in-depth look at today's most important issues.
Welcome to Conservative Roundtable. I'm Howard Phillips, chairman of the Conservative Caucus, which sponsors Roundtable, now being broadcast all over the United States of America. We have as our guest Brian Darling. He's a repeat guest. He was so good the first time, we thought he would come back. He's now the director of Senate Relations for the Heritage Foundation. And there's no one we could find who is more knowledgeable about developments on Capitol Hill than Mr. Darling. Brian, prediction. Are they going to get Obamacare?
Well, I predicted that it's going to pass at one point, that it's not going to pass at one point, and I think that there's a good chance it won't pass. I know that we feel like the momentum is in favor of it passing. It looks like the president's having, summits. He's getting meetings together. He's got a new strategy to pass the bill. But the bottom line is the American people absolutely hate this bill. If you look at the poll numbers, across the board, they indicate that the American people reject the president's proposal. The people from the great state of Massachusetts, a liberal state where I'm from.
That's my state, too.
Yeah.
A lot of conservatives came out of Massachusetts.
That's right. Some great conservatives, but more liberals come out of Massachusetts. I mean, the state of John Kerry, Ted Kennedy, Barney Frank. I mean, this is a liberal state for the most part.
Barney Frank voted for me when I was elected president of the Harvard Student Council.
That was the last good vote he had.
That was a big mistake he made.
Well, anyway. You look at this state, a far left state, a state that's elected many liberals, sent them to Washington, D.C., a delegation that doesn't have any Republicans in it and hasn't had a House member for over 10 years. And a
Peggy Heckler was the last one.
Yeah, and the last senator from Massachusetts was elected in 1972. So this state elects a Republican.
That was Henry Cabot Lodge.
Yeah. You have a Lodge, it's amazing. This state that's so far left elects a Republican by 5 percentage points.
And many Republican governors.
Yeah, many Republican governors.
Volpe, Sargent, many others.
Yeah, Mitt Romney.
Mitt Romney, yeah.
But you look at the state. I mean, this is a state where this guy, Scott Brown, not a very well-known name in the state senator, he runs on a campaign of, I'm going to go to Washington and block Obamacare, and he wins. And that's...
Just call me 41, he said.
Exactly, yeah. He wants to be known as 41. The caucus calls him 41. So you have this groundswell of opposition to the president's health care proposal, and for whatever reason, they decide to double down on bad policy, and they keep moving forward with it.
And the Republicans are stupid enough to help them.
Yeah, they haven't done a very good job of opposing this. They have the support of most Americans, and they have not defeated this bill yet.
And they're going to this little kissy face match with Obama.
Yeah.
How foolish of them. What stupid idiots.
Well, this is, it's called the Blair House Summit, Republicans getting together with Democrats. And, pretty much a definition of bipartisanship for the Democrats are, basically Republicans will just go along with whatever the Democrats
the Republicans
want.
surrender, that's bipartisan.
Exactly. If they surrender, it's bipartisan. If they don't, it's a breakdown of bipartisanship, and we have problems in Washington, D.C. So you actually have the Democrats arguing. They're all mad that Scott Brown came in, and now the Republicans can successfully filibuster legislation.
Now Patrick Kennedy, as he announced his departure from the House of Representatives, took a parting shot at Scott Brown.
Yeah.
And said that he was voting against the people of Massachusetts when he sided with the Republicans on the NLRB issue.
Oh, it's unbelievable. It's unbelievable. Yeah, Scott Brown was in Washington for one vote, and already Kennedy was attacking him.
Yeah. Well, that Kennedy will soon be forgotten.
Yeah.
And, of course, his mother was devastated by the way his father treated her. Joan Kennedy was a beautiful girl. I knew her. She went to Leslie College, and she was absolutely lovely and gorgeous. And Ted Kennedy turned her into a drunk. It was just very sad. Now, let's talk about the difference in a filibuster strategy and a reconciliation strategy.
Yeah.
Explain that.
Well, basically, reconciliation was put forward.
This is on Obamacare we're talking
about. Yes, they're intending on using reconciliation to pass Obamacare.
And what does that mean?
Now, reconciliation is usually used to balance a budget. And it was established in 1972 as a procedure to basically put the budget in balance. Basically, you could increase taxes, lower taxes, you could cut spending, increase entitlement spending, or do a debt limit modification, and that was a traditional use of it. Now the Democrats say, oh, you know, Republicans used it for Bush tax cuts and to do welfare reform. Well, you know, they all had budgetary impacts, but what they're trying to do now is basically use reconciliation as a way to get around the filibuster. They're using it as a method of...
They need 51 votes instead of 60.
Right. It changes the threshold in the Senate, so all of a sudden you need a simple majority, and it's a way for them to get around the filibuster. It also, you know, it's just an amazing way to just shut down dissent, to shut down the rights of the minority to offer amendments, to participate in the process. It's a way to fast-track Obamacare through Congress and try and get it through before the American people know it.
Some people think it will be suicidal for the Democrats if they pursue that course.
Yeah.
They need 51. How many do you think they have?
Well, here's the irony. It's going to be harder to pass in the House than in the Senate. You know, in the Senate, all of a sudden you have moderate Democrats who can vote against Obamacare, and this is a great reward for them. All of a sudden they can play both sides. They can have voted for it when it mattered for the bill, but in reconciliation, you're going to have moderate Democrats voting no, so they can play both sides and try and go home to their constituents and say, hey, in the end, I voted against Obamacare. But in the House, they're going to have a hard time passing this.
Because of the abortion issue.
Exactly.
Explain that.
It's funny, all these issues about the public option and the tax provisions and the national mandate, bottom line is, the Senate passed a bill that allows federal funding of abortion in Obamacare, and that's going to be the one issue that's going to make this very difficult to pass in the House.
And Stupak has said he will not yield. He's the guy who drafted the anti-abortion language.
Yep. Stupak and Gao, the one Republican who voted for it in the House.
CAO of Louisiana.
Yep, he will not vote for something that has abortion language in it. So you have, if you take those two members out, all of a sudden the deciding vote in the House was Nancy Pelosi. So they have to keep every single member that voted for it before Ann Pelosi to break the tie to get this passed in the House. That's going to be hard to do.
So if you were making a prediction, you'd say we will not get Obamacare.
Yeah, I would say that it's more likely that this doesn't pass because, look, these Democrats have to be looking in the mirror and saying to themselves, I really like being a member of Congress. I don't want to commit political suicide over an issue I really don't care that much about. I don't have any burning desire to pass this massive rewrite of health care law and give up my job as a result. So I think you have many members that voted for it in the past that are going to have a hard time walking the plank and voting for it again.
I was listening to C-SPAN radio on Sunday as I was coming out of church, and they had a woman on who said, my husband and I just spent X hundreds of thousands of dollars on a new house. And however, if either of us gets sick, we'll be financially ruined because we have no health insurance. So this selfish woman can spend all kinds of money on a fancy house, but will not spend the money for health insurance. She expects the taxpayers to pick up the bill for her.
Yeah, well, that's the mentality of many, that they're owed something by the federal government. And this new proposal that the president has put out actually adds a new layer of government control. It allows the government to control health care insurance rates, which is amazing that this proposal is wildly unpopular, so they put something else that will make it even more unpopular.
Now, is Obama, as a way of seeking Republican support, making concessions on insurance for doctors?
No, the president has had there has been a proposal, part of the proposal that passed in the House and the Senate, that will give some money to states to look into alternatives on medical malpractice reform. But the bottom line is, you know, they're basically checking the box. They have
they are in hock to the trial lawyers,
and
they're not going to make any exceptions.
Right. There's no real medical malpractice reform. There's no real effort to allow competition across state lines for insurance companies. There's no real effort to reform our healthcare system, in the sense that one of the things we need to do is reform the way that the tax code treats healthcare. I mean, right now we have a system where if you move from one job to another, you know, you're hurt by the tax code and the fact that companies can have these massive plans that are deductible and they give you benefits in the form of massive healthcare plans.
We're going to have to take a break. When we come back, I want to shift gears and get your view as to what is likely to happen in the Obama push for amnesty, which we see coming down the road. Stay with us, and Brian Darling will tell us what to expect on the Obama push for amnesty for illegal aliens. We'll be right back.
You are a defender of liberty. You spoke out.
That is part of your job.
You were heard in Congress.
No.
You marched. You created a new movement. You endured attacks.
You see folks waving tea bags around.
Now you can help to
Repeal the bill.
go to sendtheramessage.com. Print the pledge to repeal Obamacare. Send it to your representative, senators, and candidates to sign that they pledge to
Repeal the bill. Repeal the bill.
Repeal the bill. Repeal the bill.
Repeal the bill.
Repeal the bill. Repeal the bill. Repeal the bill.
Repeal the bill now.
go to sendtheramessage.com and help.
Repeal the bill.
Hi, I'm Marsha Blackburn from Tennessee's 7th Congressional District. Just as you hear every couple of years, this is an important election. And I think for those of us who are conservatives, this is indeed a very crucial election. Everything's on the ballot, and this is one of those years to show up and be counted and make your conservative voice heard. Whether it is reducing federal spending, reducing the size of the bureaucracy, or securing our border. These are issues that are of primary importance to us. And I hope that all of our conservatives are going to show up and vote to protect faith, family, freedom, hope, and opportunity.
Welcome back. I'm Howard Phillips, Chairman of the Conservative Caucus, with our special guest, Brian Darling, who's head of Senate Relations for the Heritage Foundation. And there's so much to talk about. I think we've pretty well covered Obamacare, and we agree that there's a good chance we can kill that. But let's talk about the judiciary. I have predicted for quite some time that this spring Ginsburg and Stevens will give up their seats on the court. And the reason I believe they will do it this spring is that will give Obama the opportunity to name their replacements while he still has 60 votes in the Senate. They can read the tea leaves, and they know that after the November elections, he won't be able to ram through his Supreme Court nominations. What are your thoughts on that and other judicial issues?
Well, we've had Justice Sonia Sotomayor, who was nominated by the president. This nominee is somebody who was very hostile to the Second Amendment, somebody who was very far to the left in many of her beliefs, and talked about how legislating from the bench was perfectly reasonable. So I think we can expect more far-left nominees. And with the fact that Democrats have so many votes in the Senate, they probably feel more comfortable about going further to the left and getting a more liberal nominee and trying to get somebody who really will change over the court, somebody they don't have to worry about that may vote the wrong way. So from their perspective. But I think it's going to be a huge fight. We're going to see a battle in the Senate. We've already seen the left messaging on getting rid of the filibuster. So they want to get rid of the filibuster. They don't like the fact that there's any resistance at all in the Senate and there's any right for the rights of the minority to debate and offer endless amendments on different pieces of legislation. So we may see a Supreme Court nominee be a pretext for the left to take an attack on the filibuster.
All I can say is thank God that David Souter and Sandra Day O'Connor decided to leave the court. We would not have had that excellent decision, with especially Clarence Thomas's excellent concurring opinion on on the First Amendment and federal election laws, had Souter and O'Connor still remained on the court. You know, one of the issues that I think is a sleeper and is very important is Puerto Rican statehood. Have you covered the Puerto Rico legislation that's in Congress now? Do you follow that?
Yeah, a little bit, yeah.
Of course, that would be a disaster. If the people of Puerto Rico vote for statehood, which they have not done in the past, that would mean 2 more left-wing senators and maybe a half a dozen left-wing members of the U.S. House of Representatives. it has received far less public scrutiny and attention than I think it merits.
Yeah, and that's an important issue. It's something that hasn't moved very far in the Senate and the House to date. But you also have a couple other special interest issues coming up, like the Native Hawaiian bill, which is being voted on in the House. The House is pushing the Native Hawaiian bill, which basically it set up a separate government.
It's a state within a state.
It would be a state within a state. It'd actually be a state that would transcend boundaries, because you have Native Hawaiians in almost all the 50 states, and all Native Hawaiians would be part of this nation. It's a race-based way of governing. This is something that the Supreme Court has said is wrong. So what does Congress do? They come back and try and pass legislation to overturn what the Supreme Court has done. You also have the issue of D.C. statehood, which passed the Senate, has not passed the House, because some smart members of the Senate attached an amendment that would allow residents of the District of Columbia to have a firearm. And so that legislation was too much for the House to accept, so they are not moving forward with allowing the District of Columbia a vote in the House.
Now, Larry Pratt at Gun Owners of America and the NRA have done a good job in blocking D.C. statehood and unconstitutional D.C. representation in the House. What about cap and trade?
Yeah,
what is cap and trade?
Well, cap and trade is, we've heard a lot of talk about global warming, and then we have record snowfalls in Washington, D.C., a very cold winter in comparison to other winters. So it's funny, the left, and we've had a huge controversy over the science behind global warming. You have many scientists who have backed away from prior assumption. There's a big fraud scheme that's been put forth on the American people in the world with scientists who have not been acted in good faith and have taken hidden documents and done things to hide the fact that their science wasn't working out the way they wanted it to, so they had to change some of the statistics. So you have that as a pretext. But Congress has been working on the scheme to basically tax companies to try and dissuade them from producing carbon dioxide. And they had a scheme where the scheme is basically where companies would trade credits and buy credits so they could in the end have a cap on the amount of carbon dioxide that's given up. But what has happened as a result is the Heritage Foundation has done quite a few studies on this, and it would be a job killer. I mean, the fact that you're going to be taxing...
Especially when China and India wouldn't be doing anything.
Oh, yeah, they're not going to abide by any of these same caps. So basically what we're going to, in the end, do is make us less competitive with these nations, and we're going to be taxing and killing jobs domestically. We're going to have jobs fly overseas, and we're going to have less productive energy sector, which has actually proven to be a reasonably productive sector in our economy.
Well, while we're on the subject of China, what about space? Obama is unilaterally disarming the United States when it comes to space. The opposite of President John F. Kennedy, who made it a key component of his administration to get Americans on the moon. And now we're turning over even inner space to Red China and forfeiting our ability to operate there.
Yeah, I mean, I remember the good old days, peace through strength. Well, we're not there anymore. We have a president who is governing in the idea that somehow he can be diplomatic with all these countries that hate us, and they're going to all of a sudden change around and like us. And the disarmament of space is a huge problem. The fact that we're dismantling our missile defense in the former Soviet bloc, that's making our nation weaker, and it's actually a sign of weakness.
And look at the U.S. Navy, 600 ships under Reagan. They set a goal of restoring it to 333 ships this year. They fell far short of that.
Yeah.
And you've got the Red Chinese building up their Navy. I mean, it is disgusting. It's ludicrous what's going on. Talk to me about amnesty for illegal aliens. What's going to happen on that?
Well, the House has put forth some legislation. The Senate hasn't done anything on it. And I think it's unlikely that the House and the Senate can really move forward on anything, because if you look at the popularity of Congress, Congress is at an all-time low right now in popularity. So basically the president's used up his political capital on trying to get cap and trade passed, health care passed. There's no more, I mean, you don't have Democrats that are willing to move forward with further proposals.
Has he used up his political capital on the homosexualization of the military, which, by the way, would have an impact on same-sex marriage? Mm-hmm. You'd have military chaplains required to officiate at homosexual marriages. Yeah. You would have hermaphrodites given special privileges in the military. You've got the North American boy love association with special privileges in the military. How can Congress let this happen?
Yeah, it's amazing.
And they have to change the law in order to have this power for perverts.
Well, this may be the president messaging on an issue that's never going to happen. I mean, Congress, I can't imagine there's a will in Congress to move forward with this legislation at a time when we're at war. I mean, using the military as a social experiment for, just so the president can check off one of his campaign promises. So I think it may happen, but it's not going to be an easy thing to do. You got senators like John McCain of Arizona. You have House members that are not happy with this at this time, at a time of war, to use the military as a social experiment.
We have to take a break here. After the break, we're going to give you some last words on whatever you want to discuss. Brian, I really appreciate everything you're doing.
Oh, thank you.
You do a great job at Heritage. Heritage does a great job. And I don't know anyone who's more knowledgeable on these important issues before the country than you. You follow it all. You know what needs to be done. And we look forward to your parting comments right after these messages.
Hey, listen. This is the greatest thing. I want to tell you something. Something's happening in this country. And I want to tell you, look around my friends here. My friends here in Washington, come over here. See all these great people? These great folks are here because they want to take the country back to the direction of the Founding Fathers and stop all this nonsense that's going on and stop this, this immersion into socialism, which is happening. We've got to stop it. And every day we're losing a little bit of our freedom. But the answer is that the individual citizens can make a difference. They can walk through these houses of Congress. They can look their congressman in the eye and say, hey, vote this bill down. Get rid of it. We got a lot of work to do. And the first thing we have to do is get rid of the garbage and the attacks on our freedoms. This is it. So anyway, that's what these guys are doing here today to do. Yes! And I say, all of you guys out there, with the sound of my voice and the visual that this great gentleman has created, get down here and do your responsible citizenship by going and seeing your representatives and telling them, what you want, because this is your house. It's not their house. Yeah. Get in there and tell them what to do, and let's begin cleaning this country up. A big mess has been created in only a year's time, in 9 months' time, really. A big mess we have to recover from. We got to start working. We got to throw some people out. So anyway, I love this country. I love you. Go do your job. Thank you for your help. Thank you.
Welcome back. I'm Howard Phillips, chairman of the Conservative Caucus, which sponsors Conservative Roundtable, now being broadcast all over America. If you'd like to receive some of our publications and information about our activities, our newsletter, the Howard Phillips Issues and Strategy Bulletin, or my constitutional blogs, if you're interested in getting back copies of Conservative Roundtable, one thing you can do is check out our website, www.conservativeusa.org, and at no cost or obligation, we'll be happy to send information to you. Well, Brian Darling has been our guest, and he has shown that he knows a lot about almost everything. Brian, how did you prepare yourself for your current position of analysis and leadership? And how do you stay on top of so many things?
Well, I was mentored by a great man, Mike Hammond, who was a former general counsel for the Senate Steering Committee. He worked there for years, worked for Senator Bob Smith from New Hampshire, who I used to work for. and somebody who I learned so much from on how to fight against bad ideas in the Senate and to utilize the rules of the Senate to slow up legislation and to make sure that bad stuff doesn't happen. Because we get a lot of politicians and they really want to get stuff done. They want to be part of solutions. But there are many situations where you have legislation that's just bad. I mean, the health care debate right now is a great example. Obamacare is a bad idea. It needs to be defeated. Maybe in the future there will be good health care legislation that can come up and pass in the House and the Senate, but Obamacare isn't it.
I'm not sure it's any damn business of the federal government, good, bad, or indifferent.
Yeah.
Yeah, Mike Hammond is someone I greatly admire. He is a genius.
He is.
And one of my big disappointments through the decades I've been here is that when Mike ran for Congress from New Hampshire, he didn't make it. And I was very disappointed that what was once a great conservative newspaper, the Union Leader, did not give him the support he merited. I knew Bill Loeb and Naki Loeb, who ran that paper, and I don't know, I think Bill Loeb was dead by then, and Naki had really turned things over to a younger crew. Well, tell us what else we ought to be thinking about.
Yeah, well, I think this is a great time with all the great work the Conservative Caucus of. I write for Human Events. Human Events is doing a great job getting the conservative message out. Tom Winter's doing a great job there. Alan Riskin, John Gizzi and the crew.
I used to write for them.
Yeah, it's a great publication. I'm honored to write for them.
It was Ronald Reagan's favorite publication.
Yeah, that's right. And the Heritage
Foundation. Where's my Human Events?
I mean, my current employer, the Heritage Foundation, is still a stalwart and putting out research and trying to fight the good fight in Washington. That's got
Ted
a lot
Folder has done a magnificent job of building the Heritage Foundation.
Yeah.
And he deserves all kinds of praise and awards for his role as a leader and an administrator.
Yeah, and Heritage Foundation is doing great. We have a lot of new voices in the movement, like Red State, which is a conservative blog run out of Georgia, Big Government, which is a blog that's run out of Washington, D.C. and associated with Andrew Breitbart.
Our thoughts continue, but our time is up.
Great.
Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
We enjoyed it. Thank you for watching Conservative Roundtable. Stay with us every week.